All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking on the Dungeon Master's Guide, Premium Edition.
Yeah, the ultimate handbook, basically, for anyone thinking about becoming a dungeon master in D&D.
That's right. It is, well, a massive guide full of rules, tables, advice.
Yeah, it can be a bit much, to be honest, at first.
It's overwhelming, yeah. But
that's why we're here, right?
Exactly, to help you navigate this thing and extract those juicy insights.
Find the good stuff, yeah.
Right off the bat, the guide compares dungeon mastering to a science. Now, I'm no scientist.
Right.
But I can see where they're going with that.
It's pretty apt when you think about it.
Okay.
Like, a good DM, just like a scientist, needs to be prepared.
Right.
Detail-oriented, willing to experiment. You're basically creating a world with its own rules, its own systems.
Oh, wow.
And then observing how those systems interact with the player's actions,
So it's not just storytelling.
No.
There's real game design, like systems thinking involved.
Absolutely. The guide stresses that balance is key.
Okay.
Creating challenges that are engaging.
Right.
But also fair for all the players.
Right.
Everyone has a chance to shine, to contribute to the story.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of work, dedication.
Yeah, the guide is very upfront about the fact that dungeon mastering, it's a labor of love. Time-consuming, intellectually challenging. It requires a real passion for the game.
Yeah.
But the rewards, they're immense.
Okay.
There's nothing quite like watching your world come to life.
Right.
Seeing the players make choices that, shapes the narrative.
Right.
It's really witnessing that spark of shared creativity.
Yeah. Okay, so dungeon mastering is a science. What are the basic elements of this experiment?
Okay, sure.
What foundational knowledge do you need to have?
Well, the guide, it dives into a lot of detail about character creation. You've got abilities, races, alignment, spells. It even breaks down specific spells for different classes, like clerics, magic users, things like
that. There's just so much information to absorb.
There is, yeah. And that complexity, it's reflected in the sheer number of tables and charts that you find throughout the guide.
Okay.
For example, you've got extensive tables dedicated to combat.
Okay.
They outline things like opponent armor class, hit points, even an assassin's table for assassinations.
An assassin's table?
Yeah.
Now that sounds
pretty cool, huh?
Intriguing.
Yeah. And speaking of intriguing tables, there's one that caught my eye.
Okay.
The effects of alcohol and drugs table.
Wait, alcohol and drugs?
Yeah.
In a fantasy game?
Exactly. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It really speaks to the game's attention to detail.
Yeah.
Its commitment to creating a truly immersive experience.
Wow.
This table, it outlines how intoxication and recovery are actually incorporated into the gameplay.
Wow.
Like, imagine a player trying to negotiate a delicate treaty, right?
Right.
While under the influence of dwarven ale.
Okay.
Or a fighter trying to, make a daring escape.
Right.
But with blurred vision.
Right, yes.
Impaired dexterity.
I can see it now.
It adds this whole new layer, right, of unpredictability and humor to the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of unpredictable, the guide also mentions a section on insanity.
Oh, yeah, the insanity section.
Yeah.
This is a fascinating one.
Okay.
It introduces this possibility of characters, experiencing mental breakdowns.
Wow.
Developing various forms of madness. This can add, this whole other layer of complexity, to character development.
Right.
And create some really compelling narrative arcs.
Yeah, it sounds like a DM needs to be prepared to handle some pretty intense role-playing moments.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes it so challenging and rewarding, right? You're not just telling a story, you're creating this environment where players can really embody their characters.
Yeah.
And explore the depths of their personalities.
This is all starting to make me realize how much more there is to dungeon mastering than simply rolling dice. Fighting monsters.
It's a common misconception, yeah.
Yeah.
At its core, dungeon mastering, it's about creating a world, breathing life into that world.
Right.
And then inviting players to explore, interact with it.
And the guide emphasizes that world building is a key aspect with the DM's role.
Huge, yeah. It stresses the importance of creating a unique, detailed world.
Okay.
Considering everything from geography and climate to the cultures, the societies that inhabit it.
Right.
Finding that balance, between adhering to the rules and fostering creativity.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
Between structure and freedom.
Exactly. You want to give players, a framework to operate within.
Yeah.
But also, allow them the freedom to make meaningful choices.
Right.
Shape the narrative.
So what about the tools?
Okay.
What tools does a dungeon master have to manage all these different elements?
Okay.
From the intricate rules to the grand scope of world building?
Okay, well, one of the most important tools might surprise you.
Oh.
Dice.
Dice.
Right.
But I thought D&D was more than just rolling dice.
It is.
Okay.
But dice, they play this crucial role in generating random numbers.
Okay.
And introducing an element of chance into the game.
I've always wondered about the different types of dice used in D&D.
Right. Well, the guide, it actually provides this detailed explanation of the various dice and their uses. But the real workhorse of the game, it's the iconic 20-sided die.
Okay.
The D20.
Right.
It's used for everything.
Wow, okay.
From determining character attributes to resolving actions,
Okay, so how do those bell-shaped probability curves you mentioned factor into all this?
That's a great question. So, the D20's results, they create a bell-shaped probability curve.
Oh, okay.
Meaning results closer to the average, like 10 or 11.
Right.
They're more likely
Okay.
than extreme highs or lows.
Okay.
This impacts everything.
Right.
From attack rolls to skill checks,
Okay.
It ensures a degree of predictability.
Right.
But still allows for unexpected outcomes.
I see.
Yeah.
So the mechanics of the game work together to create a balanced and engaging experience?
Exactly.
Okay.
The rules provide the framework.
Right.
The dice introduce randomness.
Right.
And the DM, they act as this conductor,
Okay.
orchestrating the flow of the game, making sure everything runs smoothly.
So we've talked about the mechanics, the dice, the world building.
Right.
But what about the stories themselves?
Right.
What kind of narratives can you actually create within this system?
Okay, well, let's dive into a specific example from the guide.
Okay.
Lycanthropy.
Lycanthropy.
Yeah.
Like the transformation into
a werewolf.
Werewolves.
Yeah, or other, monstrous creatures.
Yeah, that's something I can sink my teeth into.
Yeah. So the guide, it outlines how a character can become afflicted with lycanthropy.
Okay.
It details the specific conditions.
Like what?
Like being bitten for a certain amount of hit points.
Okay.
The race restriction.
Race restriction.
Humans only.
Humans only. Okay.
Yeah, and the limited time window for a cure.
So it's not as simple as just getting bitten by a werewolf.
No.
There's a whole set of rules.
It's a process.
Okay.
Yeah.
That govern the transformation.
Absolutely.
And it gets even more interesting when you consider the cure.
Oh, right.
The guide mentions that a high-level cleric might be able to administer a remove curse spell to reverse the transformation. But I bet there's a catch.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
The spell, it has to be performed while the character's in were form.
So you're telling me you have to cure someone
Yeah.
while they're a raging werewolf?
That's the dilemma.
Wow.
It raises some really interesting questions.
Yeah.
Like, what if the cure fails?
Right.
Could a player character become a monster permanently?
Wow.
How would that affect, their relationships with other party members?
That's a fantastic example of how the mechanics and the narrative can intertwine to create truly compelling scenarios.
It's one of the things that makes it so great.
And speaking of character motivations, choices, the guide also delves into the concept of alignment.
Oh, yeah, alignment.
Right, this is important.
Like good versus evil.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Alignment, it represents a character's moral and ethical compass, guiding their actions, their interactions within the world.
So it's not just a label.
No.
It's an active force
It is.
that influences how character makes decisions.
It influences their worldview, how they relate to others.
It's a key element in defining a character's personality.
It is, yeah.
How they navigate the world.
Absolutely. And the guide, it mentions that alignment.
Yeah.
It's often tied to religious beliefs. Yeah. It explains how creatures are grouped into factions based on their alignment, like lawful good or chaotic evil.
Okay, so does that mean creatures with the same alignment always get along?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
The guide, it actually uses this example
of two lawful good nations at war.
Oh, wow.
To illustrate this point.
Okay.
They might, share the same fundamental values.
Right.
But their differing interests can still lead to conflict.
So alignment doesn't dictate every decision. Yeah. There's still room for complex moral dilemmas.
Yeah, and it highlights the importance of role-playing. Players can't just hide behind their alignment.
Right.
They have to embody their characters.
Right.
Make choices that are consistent with their beliefs, their motivations.
Yeah. What happens if a character wants to change their alignment? Is that even allowed?
The guide, it makes it very clear that changing alignment is a serious matter. Not something to be taken lightly.
Right.
It can have significant consequences. Particularly for certain classes like clerics and druids.
What kind of consequences?
Well, for clerics, changing alignment could affect their relationship with their deity.
Right.
Potentially impacting their ability to cast spells.
Wow.
For druids, changing alignment could result in the loss of their powers altogether.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal.
It is.
It shows how deeply ingrained alignment is.
Absolutely.
Within the system.
The guide emphasizes that changing alignment, it should be like a meaningful event in a character's journey, not just a quick fix or a way to gain an advantage. It's about exploring, the complexities of morality, the choices that characters make in a world full of, shades of gray.
Okay, so we've talked about character creation, importance of alignment, challenges of world building.
Right.
But D&D is also about adventure, combat. Right.
Yeah.
What does the guide say about the more action-packed aspects of the game?
Okay. So it certainly doesn't shy away from the more strategic and, let's say, underhanded aspects of adventuring. Right. It even includes sections on spying, setting traps.
Intrigue.
Yeah.
Espionage.
Yeah. Now we're talking.
What kind of details does the guide provide?
Okay. So it outlines different types of spying missions. Like observation versus actively seeking information. It even has a spy failure table.
Ooh, a spy failure table to determine the consequences of a botched mission.
Right.
Oh, I bet that leads to some hilarious and disastrous outcomes.
For sure.
Yeah. And when it comes to traps, the guide highlights that certain classes, like assassins, are more skilled at setting and using them than others.
Absolutely.
So if I'm a DM and I have a player who chooses to be an assassin, how do I ensure that their expertise in traps and poison feels impactful without overshadowing other players?
That's a great question.
It gets to the heart of the DM's role as this facilitator and a balancer. You want to make sure that all players feel like their characters are contributing to the game in meaningful ways.
Right. So how do you strike that balance?
One approach is to tailor the encounters and the challenges, to the specific strengths of the party. For example, you could design a dungeon, with hidden passages, pressure plates that allow the assassin to shine, while also incorporating puzzles and social encounters that cater to the strengths of other party members.
So it's about creating a diverse range of challenges that allow all players to utilize their unique abilities.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's also about being mindful of how certain abilities, like trap setting,
poison making, can affect the overall flow and balance of the game. You don't want one player to dominate every encounter. So you need to find creative ways to challenge them. And ensure that everyone feels like they're contributing.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And when it comes to poison, the guide outlines different types of poisons. Their effects. Including things like saving throws. Chances of detecting the poison. And the potential for assassins to use them more effectively than other characters.
So assassins really are masters of the underhanded arts of combat.
They certainly have a knack for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guide, it highlights their expertise in using poisons.
Right.
Setting traps.
Right.
Emphasizing their ability to,
yeah.
control the battlefield
Yeah.
in subtle but deadly ways.
It sounds like a DM needs to be prepared for all sorts of cunning and strategic plays.
Absolutely.
From players who choose the assassin path.
It adds this whole other layer of complexity, right? It makes it more challenging, engaging for both the DM and the players.
Speaking of power, let's talk about the Dungeon Master's authority.
Okay.
What does it entail?
All right.
How much control does a DM actually have over the game?
So the guide, it makes it clear that the Dungeon Master is the ultimate authority.
Wow. Okay.
So you control the dice.
Right.
You shape the narrative.
Right.
You even have the power to overrule random outcomes.
Wow.
To ensure a compelling experience.
So the DM can actually bend the rules if necessary.
In certain situations, yes.
Wow.
But the guide, it also emphasizes the importance of fairness and balance.
Right.
The DM shouldn't abuse this power.
Right.
To harm characters or create these unwinnable scenarios.
Right.
It's about using your power responsibly, to craft a fun and engaging experience.
So it's like being a benevolent ruler, guiding your players through a world of challenges, possibilities, without becoming a tyrannical overlord.
Exactly. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, controlling the narrative. It's about managing time.
Time management.
Yeah.
How does that work?
In a fantasy world.
In a fantasy world, yeah.
So the guide outlines the importance of tracking time.
Okay.
Particularly when it comes to things like spell durations, the resting periods.
Okay.
Even the effects of intoxication, adds this layer of realism, strategic thinking to the game.
So I can see how tracking time could add a sense of urgency.
Oh, yeah?
To certain situations, forcing players to make difficult choices under pressure.
Absolutely. It reinforces the idea that dungeon mastering, it's about more than just rolling dice and telling stories.
Yeah.
It's about managing resources, strategizing, making decisions that have real consequences within the game.
So we've covered the mechanics, the combat, the world building, even the DM's role as this ultimate authority.
Right.
But what about the characters who populate this world?
Okay.
We've talked about player characters.
Yeah.
But what about the non-player characters?
Oh, yes. The NPCs.
The NPCs, right?
This is where the social dynamics of the game come into play.
Right.
The guide, it briefly mentions a social class and rank system.
Right.
Acknowledging these different levels of power and influence that exist within a society.
Okay.
But what's really interesting is the guide's emphasis on the DM's role in bringing NPCs to life.
So it's not just about assigning them stats roles. Yeah. It's about giving them personalities.
It is.
Motivations.
Exactly. The guide stresses the importance of treating even, minor NPCs like henchmen and hirelings as individuals with their own desires and goals.
So even the seemingly insignificant characters have a role to play in shaping the world.
Absolutely.
And the narrative.
Yeah, they can provide information.
Okay.
They can offer assistance.
Right.
Or even become obstacles, for the players to overcome.
Okay.
The guide, it even provides a great example of this.
Okay.
It highlights the fact that henchmen and hirelings are unlikely to loan money to players.
Okay.
Especially if there's a history of unpaid debts.
Right. That's a really human touch. It makes the world feel more believable, immersive.
It reinforces the idea that the DM isn't just managing a game, but creating this living, breathing world filled with characters who have their own agency, complexity.
So how does a DM go about creating a world that feels so alive and dynamic?
Okay, well, the guide offers this really intriguing example.
Okay.
A border region.
A border region.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plagued by conflict.
Ooh.
Teeming with danger.
A classic fantasy setting.
Yeah.
I love it. What kind of details?
Okay, so it paints this picture of a region where dwarves and humans are struggling to survive
Okay.
against a growing orc threat.
An orc threat?
Yeah, bolstered by ogres.
Wow.
The wilderness is filled with all sorts of monsters, right?
So it's a setting ripe for adventure.
It is.
With multiple factions vying for power.
Yeah.
A constant threat of danger.
Right.
Lurking around every corner.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how the guide suggests using this setting to create logical monster placement. Yeah. The abandoned settlements, monster-infested wilderness provide plenty of opportunities for unexpected encounters and dynamic scenarios.
So players might stumble upon an abandoned dwarven mine, now overrun by goblins.
Right, exactly.
Or they could encounter a band of orcs raiding a human village.
Precisely. And the guide, it emphasizes the potential for player choices to have a real impact on the world.
Right.
Players could, choose to tackle the threats piecemeal.
Right.
Or risk sparking a full-scale war.
Wow.
Depending on their actions and decisions.
It sounds like a world where every choice matters.
It is.
The players have a real sense of agency.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the guide also emphasizes the importance of treasure.
Treasure, yes.
Yeah.
The lifeblood of any good adventure.
Right, exactly.
What does the guide say about managing this precious resource?
Okay, so it discusses the various forms treasure can take.
Okay.
From gold and gems to magic items, artifacts.
Okay.
It highlights the DM's responsibility to carefully place these treasures within the world.
Okay.
Balancing the need to reward players.
Right.
With, maintaining a challenging experience.
So you can't just shower players with gold and magic items right from the start.
No, not if you want to create a balanced and engaging game.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the guide suggests, being more conservative with treasure in those initial stages of the campaign.
Okay.
Gradually increasing the rewards as players level up and face greater challenges.
That makes sense. You don't want players becoming overpowered too quickly.
No, absolutely not.
Or losing that thrill of discovery and achievement.
Exactly. It's about pacing the rewards, right? To keep players engaged and motivated without, undermining the challenge of the... What's really fascinating about the Dungeon Master's Guide? It goes beyond just like weapons and combat. It delves into the intricacies of creating a believable, functional society within your game world.
Yeah, it's not all about slaying dragons, looting dungeons.
Exactly.
There's a whole social and economic landscape to consider.
Yeah, the guide, it provides this framework for DMs to define the social structures, the economics, the laws of their world.
While the guide provides this framework, do you think it's important for DMs to consider more modern societal models?
Okay.
Or does sticking to a medieval framework make more sense for a fantasy setting?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on the kind of world you're trying to create, the tone you're going for. A more traditional fantasy setting, right? It might lend itself well to a medieval-inspired societal structure. But there's no reason why you couldn't incorporate elements of more modern societies if it fits your vision.
So a DM could create a world with a democratic government.
Absolutely.
Or a society that's technologically advanced.
Yeah, the guide encourages creativity, flexibility, reminding DMs that they're the architects of their own worlds.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's all about finding what works best.
It is.
For your story and your players.
Absolutely.
Does the guide give any specific examples of how to structure a society?
It does. One example it provides is this three-tiered system. Commonly found in medieval societies. You've got the upper class. The middle class. The lower class.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a structure that most people are familiar with. Even if the specifics might be different.
Exactly.
In a fantasy setting.
So the upper class would consist of, nobles, wealthy merchants, influential guild masters, basically the elite of society. They hold the most power, the most influence, shaping the laws, the direction of the society.
And the middle class.
So the middle class, they're made up of merchants, skilled artisans, those who provide, essential goods and services. They're the backbone of the economy, right? They keep society running.
And the lower class.
The lower class consists of, laborers, tradespeople, those who perform manual labor. They keep society functioning at a basic level.
So I'm starting to see how this system could create like a realistic social structure.
It can.
But how does it actually play out in the game? How can a DM use this structure to create, compelling stories and challenges?
Okay, so the guide, it suggests that the DM can use this system, to create conflicts and opportunities for the players. So imagine, the players are tasked with delivering a message to a noble. They might have to navigate the social hierarchy. Dealing with, servants, guards, possibly even rival nobles, just to reach their target.
That sounds like it could lead to some really interesting role-playing scenarios.
Absolutely.
And the guide emphasizes that the DM has a lot of freedom to adapt the system to their own world. So they could create a society based on a completely different model.
Absolutely.
If they wanted to.
The guide encourages creativity, flexibility, reminding the dungeon master that they're the architect of their own world.
So we've talked about social structures, but what about the economy? How does money actually work in a D&D world?
So the guide provides this detailed system, for managing money and trade. It outlines the different types of coins, their value, how they're used in transactions.
I've always been curious about how prices are determined in a fantasy setting. Does the guide offer any guidance?
It does, yeah. The guide includes these tables that list the costs of various items from basic supplies, like rations and torches, to luxury goods, like fine clothing and artwork.
So if the players want to buy a sword or a healing potion, the DM can consult these tables to get a sense of the price.
And the guide, it emphasizes that the DM has the power to adjust these prices based on the specific conditions of their world.
That makes sense. So in a world ravaged by war, the price of weapons and armor might be inflated due to scarcity.
Exactly.
While in a prosperous trading hub, the prices of luxury goods might be lower due to abundance.
Precisely. It allows the DM to create this realistic, dynamic economy that responds to, the events of the game.
And it gives players this tangible sense of the value of their actions, the impact they have on the world.
Absolutely. Their choices can have, real economic consequences, influencing the availability of goods and services, even shaping the political landscape.
That adds a whole new layer of depth to the game.
Makes the world feel more immersive. Believable.
So we've talked about social structures and the economy. What about laws?
Ooh.
How does justice work in a D&D world?
So the guide acknowledges that laws are an essential part of any society. But it leaves a lot of freedom to the dungeon master to define the specifics.
So a DM could create a world with a strict legal code, a lawless frontier, anything in between.
Exactly. The guide encourages the DM to consider the values and beliefs of the societies they create to design laws that reflect those values.
That makes sense. A society ruled by a benevolent monarch might have a very different legal system than a society governed by a council of wizards.
Precisely. And the type of legal system in place. It can have this huge impact on the kinds of stories you can tell, the challenges your players face.
Does the guide give any guidance on how to handle like crimes and punishments?
It does. It outlines a system for resolving crimes.
Okay.
Including investigations, trials, sentencing.
Okay.
It encourages a sense of, fairness and impartiality in the legal process.
That's important.
Yeah.
It maintains that sense of justice and order.
It does.
Within the game world, even if that order is based on a completely different set of laws than our own.
Exactly. And it allows players to experience the consequences of their actions, both good and bad.
Okay.
They might be, rewarded for upholding the law, or punished for breaking it.
It sounds like the Dungeon Master's Guide really goes far beyond
it does.
just combat and dungeon crawling.
Right.
It provides this framework for creating a believable and engaging world, complete with social structures, economic systems, laws.
It's like a blueprint for building an entire universe.
Wow.
And it empowers the Dungeon Master to be the architects of their own world, shaping the narrative, creating unique experiences for their players.
With all this in mind, what are some of the key takeaways for aspiring dungeon masters?
I think one of the most important lessons is that dungeon mastering, it's more than just running a game.
Okay.
It's about creating this immersive, interactive experience about storytelling, world building, character development.
It sounds like it's also about empowering the players to make choices that shape the narrative.
It's a collaborative process between the Dungeon Master and the players.
Okay.
The Dungeon Master sets the stage, provides the framework, but it's the players who bring the world to life through their actions and decisions.
That's a really cool concept.
It is.
It's like a shared storytelling experience where everyone contributes to the narrative.
Precisely. And the guide, it emphasizes that the Dungeon Master should be flexible, adaptable, responding to the player's choices, allowing the story to unfold organically.
So there's no one right way to run a D&D campaign.
Exactly. It's all about finding a style that works for you and your players.
Right.
Some DMs, they prefer a more structured approach, while others, they embrace a more improvisational style.
That's really empowering.
It is.
It means that every D&D campaign can be unique and memorable.
Absolutely. And the Dungeon Master's Guide. It provides the tools and guidance to make that happen.
Right.
It encourages you to experiment, to find your own voice, to have fun with the process.
So we've talked about the importance of collaboration, flexibility, world building.
Right.
What about the more technical aspects of the game?
So the guide provides this comprehensive set of rules and mechanics. It covers everything. From character creation to combat resolution.
Does it assume a certain level of familiarity with D&D?
It does, yeah. The guide is written for Dungeon Masters who already have a basic understanding of the game. Right. It builds upon that foundation established in the player's handbook.
So it's not really a beginner's guide.
No, it's more of an advanced guide.
Okay.
If someone's completely new to D&D, they should start with the player's handbook. To get a grasp of those basic rules and concepts, and then they can move on to the Dungeon Master's Guide. Right. When they're ready to take on that role. As Dungeon Master.
For aspiring Dungeon Masters.
Right.
What are some of the most important sections of the guide to focus on?
I think some of the most essential sections include those on world building, creating dungeons, and managing encounters.
Okay, let's start with world building.
All right.
What are some of the key considerations when creating a D&D world?
So the guide emphasizes the importance of, defining the history, the geography, the cultures, the societies of your world.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. Yeah. Think about the major events of the past. The climate, the terrain, the language is spoken, the religion's practiced. Right. Consider how these elements interact to create this believable, engaging setting.
It sounds like world building is a pretty daunting task.
It can be, yeah.
Does the guide provide any any tools or templates to help with this process?
It does, yeah. The guide, it includes random tables and generators.
Okay.
That can help you, flesh out your world.
I love those random generators.
They're great.
They can be so helpful for sparking ideas.
Absolutely.
Adding those unexpected twists to your world.
They're great for overcoming writer's block.
Right.
Or for adding a touch of randomness to your creation.
Okay, what are some examples of these random generators?
There's a table that generates random names for cities and towns.
Okay.
There's a generator that creates random encounters in the wilderness.
Right.
There's even a table that determines the alignment of a randomly generated deity.
That sounds incredibly
cool, right?
Helpful, yeah.
Yeah, they could take some of the guesswork out of world building, help you create a world that feels both unique and familiar.
Okay, so we've talked about world building.
Right.
What about creating dungeons?
So the guide provides this detailed system, right, for designing dungeons.
Right.
It covers everything.
Yeah.
From choosing a location to populating it with monsters and treasure.
Does it give any specific examples of dungeon layouts?
It does. Yeah, the guide, it includes sample dungeons.
Sample dungeons that you can use as inspiration or modify to fit your own needs. So there are pre-made dungeons that dungeon masters can use right out of the box.
Yeah, I'm curious about how those pre-made dungeons work.
Yeah, are they meant to be used as is, or are they more like templates that you can
That's a great question.
adapt to your own campaign?
I think it's best to think of them as a starting point.
Okay.
They provide a basic structure, some ideas.
Okay.
But you should feel free
to
customize them.
Okay.
To fit your own world.
Okay.
Your player's preferences.
So you could take a pre-made dungeon and change the monsters, the treasure, or even the overall layout.
Absolutely. The guide encourages dungeon masters to be creative, to design their own dungeons that are tailored to their specific campaigns.
Does it offer any guidance on how to do that? What are some of the key things to consider when designing a dungeon from scratch?
So the guide provides this step-by-step process, right, for designing dungeons.
Okay.
Starting with choosing a theme.
So you might decide to create a dungeon that's an ancient temple dedicated to a forgotten god, or a sprawling underground city inhabited by a race of subterranean creatures.
Exactly. Once you have a theme, you can start thinking about the overall layout of the dungeon.
Right.
How many rooms will there be?
Right.
How will they be connected?
Yeah.
Will there be any secret passages?
Right.
Or hidden areas?
I can already imagine myself getting lost in the process of designing all those intricate detail.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it can be challenging too.
Right.
The guide, it offers a lot of helpful advice on things like creating interesting encounters, placing traps and treasures, making sure that the dungeon feels like, this believable, immersive environment.
So it's not just about stringing together a bunch of rooms, throwing in some monsters.
There's a real art to it.
Right. There's a real art.
It is.
To dungeon design.
Yeah. It's about creating a space that challenges players strategically, narratively, even emotionally.
Okay. So we've covered world building and creating dungeons. What about managing encounters?
So the guide provides this comprehensive system for managing encounters. From determining the difficulty of an encounter to resolving combat.
What are some of the key factors that determine the difficulty of an encounter?
So the guide it considers the number of monsters.
Okay.
Their hit points.
Right.
Their attack power.
Right.
Their special abilities.
Okay, so a group of weak goblins would be considered an easy encounter, while a single powerful dragon would be considered a very difficult encounter.
Exactly, and the guide provides this formula, right, for calculating the experience points awarded for defeating monsters.
Okay.
Based on their difficulty.
Okay.
The harder the encounter, the more experience points the players earn.
Okay. And how do you adjust the difficulty of an encounter based on the level and abilities of the player characters?
That's an important consideration.
Yeah.
The guide provides guidelines for scaling encounters to make sure that they're challenging, but not overwhelming for the players.
Right.
You know, a group of low-level adventurers, they wouldn't be expected to face the same challenges as a group of high-level heroes.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It keeps the game balanced and engaging for everyone.
It's about finding that sweet spot. Yeah. You know, where players feel challenged, but not frustrated.
Right.
Yeah.
What about resolving combat? Does the guide go into detail about the mechanics of combat?
It does, yeah. It provides a system for resolving combat. Okay. Including initiative, attack rolls, damage rolls, saving throws.
I'm curious about the specifics of combat. Does the guide go into detail about the different types of weapons, armor available?
Yeah, it includes descriptions of the various weapons and armor, along with their properties, costs. So if a player wants to buy like a new sword, the DM can consult the guide to determine, its cost characteristics.
And what about magic items, spells? Yeah. Do they factor into combat?
Absolutely, yeah. The guide provides rules for using magic items, spells in combat, adding another layer of complexity and strategy to the game.
It's clear that the Dungeon Master's Guide is an invaluable resource.
It is.
For anyone who wants to run a D&D campaign.
Absolutely.
It's a comprehensive guide.
It is, yeah.
That covers every aspect of the game.
From the basics to the advanced.
It's like a Bible.
It is, yeah.
For Dungeon Masters.
It empowers Dungeon Masters to create their own worlds and stories, limited only by their imagination.
So for aspiring Dungeon Masters, what's the best way to approach this massive tome of knowledge?
So the guide is organized into chapters and sections, making it easy to find the information you need.
But it's still a lot to take in.
It is, yeah. But the guide encourages Dungeon Masters to read it selectively. Focusing on the sections that are most relevant to their needs.
So if a Dungeon Master is just starting out, they might want to skip over the sections on advanced magic, high level monsters.
Exactly. They can always come back to those sections later when they're ready.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
It's important not to get overwhelmed.
No, absolutely.
What other advice would you give to a new Dungeon Master? Don't be afraid to experiment. And find your own style.
Exactly.
There's no right or wrong way to use the guide.
No.
It's a tool that can be adapted to fit the needs of any Dungeon Master.
The guide encourages you to, experiment. Find your own voice. Have fun with it.
That's really empowering. Yeah. It means that every D&D campaign can be unique and memorable.
For sure.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Yeah. And it's clear that the Dungeon Master's Guide is an essential resource for anyone who wants to create and run their own D&D campaigns.
It's a treasure trove of knowledge and inspiration that can help Dungeon Masters of all levels.
It's like a portal.
It is.
To endless possibilities.
It invites Dungeon Masters to, step through that portal.
Yeah.
Explore those boundless realms of imagination.
Well, on that note, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive.
All right.
We'll explore some more of the fascinating details and insights.
Sounds good.
That the guide has to offer.
All right, let's do it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Dungeon Master's Guide. We've talked about everything from social structures to magic items.
Yeah.
But there's one aspect we haven't explored yet.
Okay.
The concept of random generation?
Oh, random generation. Yeah, this is one of the most useful and exciting tools a dungeon master has at their disposal.
Okay.
The guide is full of tables and charts that allow you to generate random elements right within your game world.
Okay.
Adding this element of unpredictability. Surprise.
So instead of meticulously planning out every detail of a dungeon or an encounter, you can roll some dice.
Yeah.
Let fate decide.
Exactly. It can take some of the pressure off of you as the DM, and it can lead to some truly unexpected and memorable moments.
I'm already intrigued what kinds of things can be randomly generated.
Almost anything, really.
Oh.
There are tables for generating random dungeon layouts.
Okay.
Random encounters, random treasure.
Wow.
Even random character traits.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I love the idea of using randomness to spark my creativity, keep things fresh.
Keep it interesting, yeah.
But doesn't that take away from the DM's control over the game?
Okay.
Like if you're constantly rolling dice to determine what happens next, doesn't that make the story feel less cohesive?
That's a valid concern, but the guide emphasizes that you, as the dungeon master, you always have the final say.
Okay.
You can use the random generators as inspiration or as a starting point.
Right.
But you're free to modify the results to fit your needs.
Okay.
Maintain the overall coherence of your story.
So it's not about being a slave to the dice. It's about using them as a tool.
Right.
To enhance your creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep the players on their toes.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Between structure, randomness, planning, improvisation.
Okay. I'm starting to see how random generation can be this powerful tool for creating a dynamic and engaging gameplay.
Right.
Can we dive into some specific examples? I'd love to hear how this works in practice.
Okay, let's start with random dungeon layouts.
Okay.
The guide includes these tables that determine things like the size and shape of rooms, the number of exits, the types of doors, even the presence of secret passages.
So you could roll a die to determine whether a room is square or circular, whether it has one door or two, whether there's a hidden trap door leading to a secret chamber.
Exactly. So it sounds like a fun way to break free from traditional dungeon design.
And it provides guidelines for connecting these randomly generated rooms together to create a complete dungeon.
It encourages you to think about like the flow of the dungeon, the placement of traps, treasures, the overall atmosphere you're trying to create.
What about random encounters? How does that work?
So the guide includes tables that list a variety of creatures.
Okay.
And their likelihood of appearing in different environments.
Okay.
So if the players are exploring a forest, you could roll a die to determine whether they encounter, a band of goblins, a hungry bear, or a mysterious hermit.
I can see how that could lead to some really unexpected and exciting moments.
It keeps the players guessing.
Right.
It prevents things from becoming too predictable.
But what if the random encounter generator throws up something that's completely out of place or inappropriate for the current situation?
That's where your judgment as the dungeon master comes in.
Right.
You always have the power to veto a random encounter or modify it to fit the context of your story.
Right.
So for example, if the random encounter table suggests a group of frost giants in the middle of a desert,
Right. That doesn't make sense.
Right. You might decide to swap them out.
Okay.
For a band of desert nomads or a pack of scavenging hyenas.
So it's about using the random generators as guidelines.
It is.
Rather than strict rules.
Exactly. You're the storyteller.
Right.
You have the ultimate authority over your world.
Okay. So we've talked about random dungeon layouts.
Right.
Random encounters. What about random treasure?
Oh.
How does that work?
So the guide includes tables.
Okay.
That list a variety of treasures.
Okay.
And their value.
Okay.
Ranging from, simple coins.
Okay.
To powerful magic items.
Okay.
So if the players defeat a group of bandits,
right,
you could roll a die to determine what kind of loot they find.
Yeah.
It might be, a few gold pieces,
right,
a healing potion,
right,
or even a magical sword,
right,
with a unique ability.
Sounds like a great way to reward players.
It is.
Keep them motivated.
Yeah, and it adds this element of excitement, anticipation to the game players. Yeah. They never know what treasures they might uncover.
We've talked about dungeons, encounters, treasure.
Right.
What about random character traits?
Okay.
How can randomness help with character creation?
So the guide, it includes these tables.
Okay.
That generate, random personality quirks, physical characteristics, backgrounds for characters.
Okay.
You could roll a die to determine whether a character is brave or cowardly, tall or short.
Okay.
A noble or a commoner.
Right.
The guide, it provides suggestions for incorporating these traits, right, into the character's personality actions.
Right.
Helping them feel more, fleshed out, believable.
I love that. It's like giving, your NPCs a bit of extra personality and depth.
Right.
Without having to spend hours crafting elaborate backstories.
Exactly. And it can be a fun way for players to flesh out their own characters as well.
It sounds like random generation is a powerful tool for dungeon masters.
It can be, yeah.
It can add variety, unpredictability, and fun to the game.
It's one of the many things that makes D&D such a dynamic, engaging game.
So for aspiring dungeon masters, what's the best way to approach random generation? Any tips for using it effectively?
I think the key is to use it selectively.
Okay.
Focus on the elements that you want to be unpredictable.
Right.
Let the random generators do their magic.
Okay.
If you want to create, a dungeon with a very specific layout.
Okay.
You might not want to use the random dungeon generator. But you might still use the random encounter generator to determine, what creatures the players encounter within that dungeon.
It's about finding that balance.
It is.
Between structure and randomness planning and improvisation.
And always remember, you're the storyteller.
Right.
You have the ultimate authority over your world.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to modify the results of random generation to fit your needs. Your vision.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the Dungeon Master's Guide.
We have.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
Through the world of dungeon mastering.
I hope it's inspired you to explore the possibilities.
I know. I'm feeling inspired. This guide. It's like a treasure chest overflowing with ideas and inspiration.
It's a reminder that the only limit to what you can create in D&D is your own imagination.
Yeah. So for all the aspiring dungeon masters out there, what's the one piece of advice you would leave them with?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay.
To be creative.
Right.
To have fun.
Right.
The Dungeon Master's Guide. It's a guide.
Right.
But ultimately, you're the one who shapes the story.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
So go forth and create your own world, your own stories, your own adventures.
Absolutely.
The possibilities are endless.
They are.
And remember that the journey is just as important as the destination.
It is.
Enjoy the process of creating and running your own D&D campaigns.
It's a rewarding experience.
Well, on that note, We'll bring this
all right.
deep dive to a close.
That was good.
Thank you for joining us on this adventure.
May your dice rolls be ever in your favor.